this part of the Bible, Ezekiel, a prophet himself, is delivering a message from God to some other prophets who are not exactly doing their job right. You see, these prophets were supposed to be speaking on behalf of God, giving people guidance and warnings about what was to come. But instead, they were just making stuff up. They were like those fake psychics you see on TV, telling people what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear. So God's not too happy about this, and he tells Ezekiel to let these prophets know that they're in big trouble. He says, "Woe to the foolish prophets who follow their own spirit and have seen nothing." Basically, God's saying, you guys think you're so wise, but you're just fooling yourselves. And it gets worse. God compares these false prophets to foxes in the desert, wandering around aimlessly and causing trouble. He says they're like whitewashed walls, looking good on the outside but full of cracks and flaws underneath. So what's the big deal? Why is God so upset with these prophets? Well, it all comes down to trust. You see, when people hear a prophet speaking, they're supposed to be able to trust that what they're saying is coming from God. But when these prophets are just making stuff up, it undermines that trust. And not only that, but it can lead people astray. If they're listening to these false prophets instead of the real deal, they might end up making some pretty bad decisions. So God's message to these prophets is a warning. Straighten up and start speaking the truth, or face the consequences. Because in the end, God's not fooled by fancy words or impressive sounding predictions. He's looking for prophets who are willing to speak the truth, even when it's hard. But it's not all bad news. In the midst of all this woe, God also offers hope. He promises to tear down the walls these false prophets have built and expose them for who they really are. And he promises to bring his people back to himself, restoring their trust and faith in him. So the message of woe to foolish prophets in Ezekiel 13 is a reminder to all of us to be careful who we listen to. Not everyone who claims to speak for God actually does, and it's up to us to discern the truth from the lies. And when we do encounter false prophets, we can take comfort in knowing that God sees through their deception and will ultimately bring justice and restoration. Now, you might be wondering, how does this apply to me? Well, think about it. We may not be prophets in the same sense as those in Ezekiel's time, but we all have a responsibility to speak truthfully and act with integrity. In today's world, there are plenty of false prophets out there, spreading misinformation and leading people astray. They may not claim to speak for God directly, but their words and actions can still have a powerful influence. Take, for example, the spread of fake news and misinformation on social media. It's easy for rumors and falsehoods to spread like wildfire, causing confusion and harm. And just like in Ezekiel's time, people can end up making bad decisions based on false information. But it's not just about what we say, it's also about how we live our lives. Are we being honest and trustworthy in our dealings with others? Or are we putting on a false front, pretending to be something we're not? In Ezekiel 13, God condemns the false prophets for their hypocrisy, comparing them to whitewashed walls. They may look good on the outside, but underneath they're full of cracks and flaws. It's a reminder that true integrity goes beyond appearances. It's about being genuine and sincere in everything we do. So what can we learn from Ezekiel 13? Well, first and foremost, it's a call to be discerning. Just because someone claims to speak for God or has a large following doesn't mean we should blindly trust them. We need to test their words against the truth of Scripture and the character of God. Secondly, it's a reminder of the importance of integrity. Whether we're leaders, influencers, or just everyday people, our words and actions matter. We have the power to either build others up or tear them down, to speak truth or spread falsehoods. And finally, it's a message of hope. Despite the prevalence of false prophets and deception, God is still in control. He sees through the lies and promises to bring justice and restoration. As long as we remain faithful to Him and His truth, we can trust that He will guide us and protect us from harm. Ezekiel the 13th of May be a warning against false prophets from centuries ago, but its message is just as relevant today. We live in a world where truth is often distorted and integrity is sometimes lacking. But as followers of God, we have a responsibility to stand firm in His truth and to live with honesty and integrity in all that we do. If you like this video, please consider supporting us by subscribing.